Hey everyone, I'm rather Incoherent, and today we're going to be talking about Marie Lambeau. Marie Lambeau is one of the unfortunate mystics to find themselves with 4 head, and that leaves them in a spot where the rest of their stats don't really matter. So the 4 in book, it's nice, it theoretically offers some options, but realistically, you just find yourself with a slightly below average stat line. She's still better than Jim. There are characters with worse than 4 head, 4 book, 3 foot for sure. This is not the worst stat line Mystic has by a mile, but it's not a super optimal stat line. It's something that's going to need help from the ability and card pool. And the ability is actually very, very good. Even though I don't think highly of Marie, I want to be clear, it's not her stat line being terrible, because you can do just fine as a 4-head Mystic. Luke's very high on my tier list. And it's not her ability, because her ability says while you have 1 or more Doom among cards you control, you may take an additional action during your turn, which can only be used to play spell cards or activate spell action abilities. That's incredibly good. The thing Mystics want to do is to activate spell cards or play spell cards. That is just, if you are playing with Doom cards, you get an extra action. And extra action abilities, which is effectively what Rex's Deduction is, it's what Ursula's Investigate is, it's what Tony Morgan's Stabbing is, right? Extra action abilities are some of the best abilities in the game, and if it's conditional on doing the thing you want to do, then that's sick. The problem is you have to have Doom on one of your cards, right? So a huge portion of how strong the deck's going to be is how well supported the Doomed archetype is. Getting into the deck building options, we have spell cards 0 to 5, Mystic 0 to 3. This is exactly like Finn Edwards, where this basically just says Mystic cards, but with a slight restriction. There's a little bit of stuff you can access to out of class, but nothing super interesting or super impactful. And typically the thing Marie wants to do is investigate with Mystic arcane assets. That's like the strongest thing this ability can be triggering. So since spells from other classes tend to take up your arcane slots, it sort of steps on the toes of this. And it's really, on the whole, not a good thing. It's just a restriction more than anything else. You also get neutral cards, of course, occult cards level 0, which does give you a couple of cool options, and then 5 other level 0 Seeker and or Survivor cards, which is obviously very good. Level 0 Seeker and Survivor have some very, very strong cards, and like, obviously, it's only really 3 cards because 2 of them are going to be Deep Knowledge. So let's go look at some decks and see how I feel about the Doomed archetype. The issue with Doom cards has always been, well, they have Doom on them, right? If you Ancient Evil's your team, it's really hard for this ability to have been worth it. Don't get me wrong, in true solo, it will have been worth it. In like a 2-player game, it's conceivable that this will be worth it, even if it results in you having an Ancient Evils. But in higher player counts, and in a lot of situations, even at lower player counts, you would really just vastly prefer to be able to deal with the Doom and manage it. Arcane Initiate and David Renfield are some of the best Doom cards, being strong value allies that are relatively easy to get rid of because you can let them soak damage, you can replace them. These are the intuitive best Doom cards, and then you just make a deck that has like all the Mystic assets, strong cards of Seeker for economy and a draw, and then like Cat Mask is really good. You're a 4-head character that wants to put Doom on stuff, obviously it works. And the way you deal with Doom on your cards, other than just letting them die, of course, is you can eat it on Sin Eater. Just get 1 Doom off of somebody, put it on Sin Eater, and then the last turn that you can, eat the Doom on Sin Eater. And then essentially your ability will have gotten you an action for every round on the agenda, -1 for the action that you eventually use to eat it on Sin Eater. That's the concept between this version of a Doom Marie deck, and it's not like incredible, it's good. It's definitely like getting some value out of being Marie and using the Doom archetype, but you're doing relatively little Doom stuff with just an Initiate and a Renfield. There's not a whole lot going on with the Doom archetype. You're not really filling the Cat Mask as often as you would like, although you are getting value out of it because you get it on the initial Initiate, then later on when you move to the Sin Eater, you refill it. It's not a terrible Cat Mask, but it's no Amina Cat Mask, right? And then coming over to the alternative version, I would really like to find a way to cram these decks together, but both of them are already 17 asset decks. In this alternative version, you run Dowsing Rod, which allows you to investigate with your head forever. Or if you don't have anything in play boosting you up yet, you can take +1 book instead, which is a little bit valuable in early scenarios, but it won't be for that long. And then you can add a Doom to it for a move, which is very valuable, and you can deal with that Doom by attaching it to El Rubash, which gives you +1 on future checks with the Dowsing Rod. So the Dowsing Rod is giving you the ability to move by getting a Doom, it's giving you the ability to just investigate for odd clue intervals that you're otherwise bad at, and then you're pretty consistently triggering Marie, and it's a similar thing. I feel like this is more combo-y because El Rubash does nothing without Dowsing Rod, and Dowsing Rod's not great unless you can manage the Doom with El. But it's another way to go about it. And it just feels like there's not quite enough slots in the deck. Like, if I cut Divination, do I have enough spells to reliably trigger this with the other allies? And as the amount of experience in the deck goes up, like, I don't really care about experience on spells. That'll happen naturally in any Mystic because Arcane Research and Down the Rabbit Hole are so strong. What I really care about is the number of new cards, and El Rubash is new. The charisma you need to pair El Rubash with these guys is new. And I'm really worried about the asset count. So like, I want to find a way to cram these two decks together, and I'm going to try to do that right now. And the only way I can find to cram them together is to cut out the economy card and crack the case, and cut out one of my Mystic assets, which honestly is fine. If you're using Dowsing Rod, you can get by with less of these. And with Uncage the Soul being leveled up with an only 46 experience stack, which in Mystic is incredibly low, this does feel like it's enough to get by, but also it's still a 19 asset deck. 17 was already too many. And once I remember to add Sin Eater, it hilariously it falls right between the other two decks at 52 experience, the other ones being 51 experience for the L route and 53 for the Allies route. And while this deck definitely works and you get by with it, it feels janky. It feels like the economy's not in a good place, like I have to get David down, spin him, and then kill him. I need the second charisma so I can use a Baron Samity and El Rubash at the same time. So I really don't need the second charisma, that's good. I'll cut that. Because that makes it easier to deal with David, and you need to deal with David for the deck to be good. But additionally, the total experience of this deck doesn't really matter. Normally, total experience matters in terms of like seeing what you'll get at the end of the campaign, and getting a vague idea of how long it takes the core to come online. But in this specific instance, you need to get 2 copies of L and Sin Eater immediately. These are going to be 3 experience each and 7 experience because of Down the Rabbit Hole, bringing us to a total of 13 experience, and then realistically it's more than that because you wouldn't be giving up a Down the Rabbit Hole upgrade. Forgot Arcane Research apparently. But you wouldn't be giving up an Arcane Research upgrade either. So realistically you'll need like 1 to 3 experience for your first 2 upgrade phases, bringing you to like 18 experience deck core to make use of your permanents and get Sin Eater plus 2 copies of El Rubash. And I don't think that's terribly slow to come online, but you have to get that going. Like in scenario 1, you're just hoping you can get Arcane Initiate or David Renfield or Dowsing Rod down at a point in time where like you get a Doom off of them, you get a free action right before the agenda flips, and that's all you get. In scenario 1, you simply don't have good ways of dealing with Sin Eater. And there's probably a way to refine this deck a little bit, get more out of your splash cards, because without Crack the Case, I'm only using 2 of my 5 for Deep Knowledge. But this really shows the problem that the Doomed archetype runs into, which is there's not a ton of great cards for it. You're really just like struggling to find a card that you get into play and has Doom on it that really helps you, and then a way to deal with it that's actually efficient. The Doomed archetype has very little going on. At the end of the day, I'm not convinced this is going to do meaningfully better than like a normal Marie deck that just didn't look at Doom at all and just played the Mystic game. And I've just gone through everything available to Marie, checking out all the spells and all the other classes, and there really isn't anything that changes the original problem I said. What you want to do is use those free spell actions on Clairvoyance and Rite of Seeking. They're the most powerful thing you can do. A portion of your deck goes to setting up your Doom assets, and then you just need Economy and Draw and a Mythos Protection. That's pretty much an entire deck, and it's very asset heavy because you need the Doom stuff, you need the clue finding spells, you have 4 heads, so you want to boost it up with stuff like Holy Rosary and Cat Mask. And it's just like, it's rough getting it all into place. I wish there was a smoother, less intensive version. I'm not convinced running L and Dowsing Rod is better. You can just run David and Arcane Initiate, and I think that's a better deck. I'm not convinced by this L and Dowsing Rod combo at all. The point being that the Doom archetype really isn't very fleshed out at all. There are very few payoff cards, there are very few great ways of mitigating it, and the cards that give you Doom outside of Arcane Initiate and David Renfield tend to do it for something that wasn't worth it in the first place. Which is the same problem that Clue Dropper assets originally had. There's just no Doom equivalent to a Press Pass. There's no Doom equivalent to a, what's it called, Quick Thinker? Quick Study, that's the one where Seekers drop a clue for +2 to a test. There just aren't the Doom cards that would like give you immediate value and then allow you to deal with it efficiently. Like Sin Eater is, I think, one of the cards that makes me angriest in the game, because this is a 7 experience card. Every Mystic takes down the rabbit hole. Just getting the ability to deal with a Doom through Sin Eater is 7 experience, and it like limits anyone who only has Mystic 2 out of it. I wish Sin Eater had been a 2 experience card so much. I feel like with the Doom archetype, they've exercised restraint that is not there for Big Money or Clue Dropper or any other archetype in the game, despite the fact that Doomed is the archetype that is the scariest and most obviously detrimental to run. The issue really is just that the entire payoff is Marie's card. You're not getting a payoff from anything else you're playing. The payoff is, it's worth it because your character said so, right? There's only 2 assets in the game, Arcane Initiate and David Renfield, where I put Doom on them, and they do stuff that makes them worth it, and I'm even considering whether or not I should try to deal with it. All the other Doom assets, in my opinion, are a net loss and not worth running, And then it's a huge experience commitment just to be able to deal with it. And at the end of the day, like in scenarios 1 and 2, Marie's at her worst, doing the least things that involve being Marie because she's the worst at dealing with Doom. And none of this is to say that Marie is terrible. I've played a game with Marie alongside Jacqueline through Dunwich where they steamrolled the campaign, and sure, Marie wasn't super impressive in that campaign, but Marie was never weak, she was never failing to do her job. It's just she was next to one of the best mystics in the game, and on her own, she, like, the thing you do as Marie had less support at the time. Cat Mask wasn't in the game, Sin Eater wasn't in the game. And now with all the support she's been given, she's better than she was, and she was already a functional character that can complete campaigns alongside good teams. Marie's not awful, it's just like the doomed archetype printed for her and Amina has never been given the support it needs to thrive. There's not a lot to say about the characters in that archetype because the archetype feels unfinished and pointless. So when your character card is specifically demanding that you invest into an archetype where it's just like a couple of ally slots and that's it, you end up with decks like this where it feels like there's not enough putting Doom on the board, or you end up with decks like this where it's a single janky combo and it can't be enough, or decks like this where it's 19 assets. And at the end of the day, it's not even clear that it's worth running the doomed archetype because the cards in it aren't really pushing your game plan super far forward. I do think this is probably the best build of Marie I've got, but it's a completely normal 4-head Mystic in scenario 1, and by scenario 3, when it's fully online, it's just, you know, a 4-head Mystic that gets slightly more actions if they played David. Marie's not really got anything going for her, and it's not because her card pool is especially terrible, it's because the doomed archetype, which she was printed for, didn't get printed alongside of her. Just because a bunch of cards say something doesn't mean it's an archetype. There are a ton of cards that are melee weapons. There's no melee weapon archetype. You don't just slap Trench Knife and Survival Knife into the same deck because they're both knives. There's no knife archetype. And in the same way, there is no Doom archetype until Hemlock Vale came out. The Doom cards were just a bunch of cards that happened to all put Doom on shit, and there was no payoff for it. There was no synergy between them. And now the synergy is you can invest experience and actions into not having to deal with it anymore, which is not a payoff if the cards weren't good enough to really make me want to run them in the first place. Doom as an archetype just isn't there. Marie as a character can like skyrocket up the list if they ever revisit Doom and, you know, give me a reason to care about the archetype. But right now, she's just a 4-head Mystic printed for an idea that doesn't exist. And as a result, she's very close to the bottom of the tier list. But a 4-head Mystic is a perfectly functional investigator, even if it results in her being kind of boring as sin. Which I suppose is appropriate for one of the 2 decks that I actually consider as running Sin Eater. Someday, if they revisit the doomed archetype, Marie might get a lot better, because it's not a fundamental feeling of her, it's a fundamental feeling of the archetype she's printed for. But for now, as it stands, like all 4-head Mystics, she can get through a campaign, she can do her job, but there's almost no reason to pick her over somebody else. Even if you wanted to do the doomed archetype, Dexter has a built-in way of mitigating Doom and can get his extra actions elsewhere instead of from his character card. For instance, just from his character card through different methods, getting the play actions for free, right? Dexter's better at the doomed archetype than anyone who's been printed for it, and that's a huge failing of the doomed archetype because, like, you should want to have the Doom consistently and play on your cards, and there's just, 1, there hasn't been good ways of doing that until Scarlet Keys, and 2, there aren't enough payoffs for it outside of your character card right now. Anyways, I feel I'm going in circles, so I'm gonna call it here. I've been rather Incoherent. I hope you enjoyed listening to me talk about Marie Lambeau and the doomed archetype. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, I greatly appreciate it. And I cannot overstate my gratitude for my supporters over on Patreon and my members on YouTube. See you in the next one.